Welcome to No Kings on the Hill with Dr. Law and Jose Clair Esquire. If you're new, please make sure to hit the follow or subscribe buttons. Plus, hit that like and share for this episode to help grow our audience. We do like to engage with our listeners, so please, if you have any questions or comments, use the chat box and we will check it as often as possible. Also, please check out our website. You see scrolling across the bottom of the screen at No Kings on the Hill with drhillaw.com, which will give you access to all of our previous episodes. We do usually go live on Wednesdays or Fridays at 7 p.m. Central, but due to Halloween, we moved it to tonight. And tonight's subject is shocking tactics President Trump is using to crash cartel supply lines. Now, it's all starts with the stealth drone, unseen at 40,000 feet, tracking a cartel convoy, but there's no longer just surveillance. Under a new decisive directive from the Trump administration, this drone isn't just watching, it's hunting. The U.S. is finally waging a real war on the cartels using five bold tactics that are crippling their supply lines and predictably causing an uproar from the political establishment. In this video, we're going to break down the operational details of this new strategy and what it means for the war on drugs. Now, it all kicked off around September the 1st, 2025, when President Trump made a direct announcement that the U.S. military had conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Trinidad Aragua narco-terrorists. Now, a grainy image surfaced showing a small open boat moving across the Caribbean, then a flash of light and fire, and the boat was gone. 11 people on that boat were killed in an instant. Now, I'm going to go off script for here a little second because people try to say, oh, you don't know what that is. I'm sorry, but nobody travels across the Caribbean Sea in that type of a boat with 11 people on it unless they're doing something illegal. Now, that single event marked a seismic shift. The decades-old failed strategy of interdiction, chasing, stopping, and arresting drug traffickers was officially over. A new doctrine had taken its place: destruction. This isn't law enforcement anymore. This is war. Since that first decisive strike, the campaign has rapidly intensified. As of late October 2025, a series of strikes have been carried out, striking over a dozen boats and resulting in dozens of casualties. What started in the Caribbean has now exploded into the Eastern Pacific, and now credible reports suggest the administration is identifying targets on land inside Venezuela. This is an unprecedented military campaign executed without a formal declaration of war from Congress and justified under a new legal framework that challenges the failed status quo. The administration's position is clear. It is defending the homeland from narco-terrorists who have killed more Americans than Al-Qaeda. But the usual critics at home and abroad are sounding the alarm using loaded terms like extrajudicial killings. The United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, Volker Turk, has predictably demanded that the U.S. must halt these attacks, calling them a violation of international law. So how did we get here? How is the United States military now blowing suspected drug boats out of the water? It's happening through five core tactics that represent a complete rewriting of the rules. To understand this necessary new strategy, you have to understand the tactics, and the first is the one that started it all. And now that is going from interdiction to annihilation. So I'm going to stop with that there, and you can go ahead and if you have anything to say on that, Joe, and then I can get on to the more in-depth part of it of you there, Joe? Are you muted? Your mic's not working now. You're muting and unmuting it, but I'm still not hearing you. I still see you up there. But for some reason, he's been having technical difficulties. So I will keep going until he can get back in. But so hold on 1 second. I gotta add him back to the stream. Are you on there? Are you back in? Yeah, now it shows you in there, Joe. I'm just not seeing any I'm not seeing any audio at all. So okay, so I don't know what's going on, Joe. So I guess I'll keep on going until you can figure out what's going on with your audio there. So for decades, the war on drugs at sea was a high-speed chase, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter trying to catch a go-fast boat. The goal was capture, seize the drugs, arrest the crew, and prosecute them. It was a law enforcement model bogged down by rules of engagement that prevented the effective use of force. That model is now ancient history. And it should be, because obviously it didn't work. I mean, the war on drugs has cost us billions and billions of dollars with you've seen no effect of it. It's just actually done nothing. The drug problems have gotten worse. Nothing's happened. So something had to be changed. What's the definition of sanity? To keep doing the same thing over and over again and not trying something new or not changing the way you were doing it? That's just common sense. Now, the new cornerstone of the Trump administration strategy is direct lethal military force, kinetic strikes against vessels suspected of drug trafficking. This isn't a chase, it's a hunt. The goal is no longer capture, it's destruction. The administration made this shift by fundamentally reclassifying the targets. They're no longer criminals, they are enemy combatants. And this is where President Trump, one of the big reasons why everybody goes, what was the big thing behind him labeling all of these drug cartels international narco terrorists? Well, the reason why they did that is because of the fact that in order for them to be able to do this, to be any combatants, they need to be narco terrorists. Is your audio working there, Joe? I see you.
Can you hear me?
But
okay.
Now I can hear you. Yep, now I can hear you.
On right now. So unfortunately, I keep getting calls. I do not know what's happening with the audio. Unfortunately, it was working before. Now it's not working. Going back to the earlier discussion, I was just going to say that there's a couple of things this signals to. It's first of all kind of a repudiation of the international order, of this expectation that somehow the international system has been working and these rules of law, dictate how countries comport themselves. But I think, the Trump administration in the United States is ahead of the curve. And in the future, we're not going to be fighting, armed enemies that wear uniforms, right? That's just the future of warfare. I also think that I've heard a couple of analysts saying that they believe that there's going to be a strike, I guess, in the next 72 hours. And I guess it's kind of the deadline is when the Senate gets back into session. And apparently they're looking to, basically prevent Trump from taking any action. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, Congress won't get through Congress, just like this little going off topic, but when the Senate passed the recent bill about the tariff things, it'll never get past Congress. Trump won't sign it, and there's no way that it'll get a veto-proof vote anyways. But what Trump did, and we'll get into this a little more later on in the show, but what he did so strategically and so effectively was that by declaring them, like I just said a minute ago, as international terrorists, then he can literally do what we did for the last 20 years against ISIS and against in Afghanistan and Iraq, that we're actually still doing without needing Congress's approval, because it's not an official war, it's a police action. It's going after international terrorist organizations. So there's not really much they can do on that. And while I think we'll still have wars with some people in uniform, yes, we're going to have a lot of them. They're going to be more like this. But yeah, so obviously, like you were saying, the predictable criticisms on a supposed lack of due process, the administration argues the enemy combatants in a war don't get due process in a civilian court. Critics immediately claimed without evidence that the targets could be simple fishermen, a talking point quickly amplified by Venezuelan media and the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro. Petro even claimed one victim was a Colombian fisherman, a claim the White House dismissed as baseless before officials anonymously confirmed there were Colombians on at least one of the boats. And yes, they may have been Colombians on the boats, but they're not going after Colombian fishing boats. These are go-fast boats. Nobody wants to travel hundreds and hundreds of miles on the open ocean in a go-fast boat that's literally got tanks of gasoline fuel, 4 or 5 outboard motors with no cover on the top, and on the open sea, one storm, you're done. That is not a type of boat that you travel across the Caribbean in unless you're transporting drugs. I'm sorry. It's just a fact. These aren't fishing boats. These aren't. And they're not doing this without having intel, whether it's on the ground intel from CIA assets embedded in Venezuela, or DEA assets or ATF assets embedded inside of, or even FBI assets embedded in these cartels. They're getting this information. They know what it is. They know what they're doing. And that's why they're doing for it. And so it's not like this Petro's claim and everything is just kind of BS. And I mean, the decisive strike first approach has been attacked with loaded terms like extrajudicial killing by a handful of politicians, from Republican Senator Rand Paul to Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego. Some legal traditionalists argue that a boat carrying drugs doesn't meet the classic imminent threat standard. The administration counters that the tens of thousands of American deaths from fentanyl is the imminent threat. So the administration remains defiant. The message is clear. The risk for drug traffickers is no longer just getting caught, it's getting killed. And that powerful shift is only possible because of where the administration has decided to wage this war. I mean, I'm pretty sure with your background and what happened to you in Venezuela, you're probably all for this attack. I mean, I don't see how somebody can't be, because we've tried the war on drugs with just arrests and all that stuff, and it's done nothing.
I mean, on one hand, having gone to Afghanistan 4 times, I'm not somebody who wants to rush to war. I think that should be a last resort. On the other hand, I do recognize that even though the public may not be aware of certain machinations that are happening in the background, it's definitely not the case that we're picking this fight with Venezuela. Whether I'm not saying that there aren't people in the United States that have an interest in obtaining Venezuelan natural resources or oil, but I think Venezuela has the curse of black gold, where they've depended on oil extraction rather than developing their society, and on an international stage, that's kind of given them a reputation for being untrustworthy and willing to do anything they can. And I wish the majority of Americans had that awareness of this is a government in name only. The Maduro administration really is a criminal organization.
Cartel.
Yeah, if you
And,
think
and
if you think the CIA and the police here in this country are armed thugs, then you definitely should go to a country like that, because they're just as bad and they'll laugh in your face while they do it.
Yeah, and now here's the thing. It's not like we're trying to do regime change. I mean, there's already a legally elected president of Venezuela that Maduro wouldn't let take place. So it's not like we're going in there and inserting our own people. The person that was legally recognized as the president of Venezuela anyways would become the president. I mean, and also the thing with this type of war is we're not going to have we probably won't need to put on the ground forces unless we're actually going to try to go in there and literally physically remove Maduro from Venezuela. We can do all of this from ships and the air. We don't need to go in and actually do a physical ground war to finish this. Now, the big thing is, and this is what's going on to the second segment, is now they're expanding it to the Pacific and expanding the quote unquote kill box. Because for years, the maritime drug war was focused on the Caribbean Sea. It was the main highway for cocaine moving from South America to the U.S. So when the Trump administration's new campaign began, the initial strikes were concentrated there. But in October, the battlefield expanded. The campaign pivoted to the Eastern Pacific Ocean. On October 22nd, the U.S. military conducted its first acknowledged strikes in this new theater, hitting 2 boats off the coast of Colombia and killing 5 people. This was followed by another major multi-strike operation on October 27th, which also took place in the Pacific. Now, why the pivot? The strategic rationale is clear. Choke off the entire supply chain. While the Caribbean is a notorious drug route, it's not the biggest one. DEA data from a few years back shows that an estimated 74% of cocaine shipments moved through the Eastern Pacific. This is the superhighway for cartels. By expanding the strikes into the Pacific, the military is signaling that there are no safe routes left. The kill box is now thousands of square miles larger. This Pacific pivot has also triggered the expedited diplomatic outcry from leaders in countries like Mexico and Colombia, whose own struggles with cartel control are well documented. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum publicly stated, "We do not agree with these attacks," while Colombian President Petro has been one of the loudest critics, calling these strikes murder. Now, I have to say is the only reason that they're speaking out against them is because the Mexican president and the Colombian president are both controlled by the cartels. I mean, isn't there proof that the Mexican president has like literally direct connections to the cartels through businesses and everything? Joe? Or
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any direct, information regarding, any kind of Mexican operation. I do know that there are rumors of that essentially, in order to get elected, that the current Mexican president had to do kind of a wink and nod handshake with the, um, I guess you want to call them narco terrorists in Mexico, which essentially have supplanted the government in many, regions there. And I think that's also true of Colombia, which has the Petro president, which is their first leftist president. He got into power by, basically creating, a peace deal with the FARC, who were self-avowed communists, and propped themselves up through, the cocaine trade for 30 or 40 years. So,
yep.
you know, it's it's but that's not to say that there's not, officials in the United States that are not in on this stuff. It's just not been enforced. And I think that we're, I don't know if you're a lover of history, but there was always the opium wars in China, and this is kind of opium war 2.0, where they're doing the same
Uh,
thing to us with fentanyl.
oh yeah, I
Yeah.
mean we've had opium dens go all the way back to the 1560. I mean, opium's been a scourge on the population for mankind as long as pretty much since the biblical times, pretty much. But I mean, the funny thing is, what most people aren't is the administration's logic is just classic military strategy. Strategy: cut off all avenues of supply. Don't just fight the enemy on one front. Open a second they weren't expecting. Traffickers can no longer just shift their routes from the Caribbean to the Pacific to avoid pressure. The pressure is now everywhere. So this new strategy rightfully throws out the old cooperative law enforcement model in favor of unilateral lethal force. The administration has clearly decided that the old ineffective partnerships weren't getting the job done. The expansion into the Pacific shows this isn't just a test run, it's a broad hemisphere wide doctrine of military force. And to project that force, they're deploying the full might of the US Navy. And also, like you were talking about a minute ago, when it comes into corruption and everything like that, is by going out here and just eliminating this stuff, there's no room for corruption. There's no room for try because when we were doing the policing wise, too many of the times DEA agents or certain DA officials were skimming off the top or taking drug cartel money or drug cartel drugs, letting so much buy to but for the cartel to pay them. And I mean, that's why it never got anywhere because the cartels either got to the DEA officials by threatening their families and stuff or bribed them with money because they don't make a lot of money. And they sit there and they go on a bus and there's a house that's got $100 million in cash sitting on pallets in it, and they make 68 grand a year. And it's hard not.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I mean, I don't have anything to really add to that, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think that it's also, we focus a lot on the legal side of things, but you made a point earlier, basically saying that, we're reining these people in, and that's exactly what's happening. Is that essentially that they're finding a legal justification to, do what we did to Russia in the Cold War, which is have them entrapped from every possible angle. And I think that that's another point to, like, the whole idea that this attack is coming in the next 72 hours. I think that the confusion that the public is experiencing over this issue is a sign that whatever, like, psychological operation they're running is working, because they have the Venezuelans thinking, an attack can come at any second. They've proven that they'll target the boats in the water. You know, I think the drugs are certainly a factor, but I do think that it's a pretext, and I think
Yeah,
that
and
it's a legitimate
we'll
one.
yeah, we'll
But
kind of get to we'll get to some of that here in a minute. We'll cover the kind of cover that aspect of it and get into the more legal aspect and also into the part of that the attack you're talking about and cover that more in kind of general because yeah, that would be the getting into the point of like we were talking a minute ago where you're saying that there's a look of they're worried about possible whatchamacallit, the possible invasion or whatever, the possible invasion of it. So that's kind of, I think that's where we're really getting into with that specific action. So, and then obviously tactic 3 is unleashing the naval warships or a naval blockade. So this new war isn't being fought with Coast Guard cutters. It's being prosecuted by the full might of the United States Navy. Starting in mid August 2025, the Pentagon began deploying a formidable array of military hardware to the region, transforming the waters into a heavily militarized zone. This isn't just a patrol, it's a de facto naval blockade. The assets being deployed are designed for war. We're talking about U.S. Navy destroyers, warships equipped with advanced radar and powerful missile arraignments. These ships are the command and control platforms for this campaign, using their sensors to detect and detract targets for the kinetic strikes. And these ships can figure out what's in those ships. They have that type of technology. Even more significantly, reports indicate a massive buildup of U.S. forces, the largest in the region since the 1989 invasion of Panama. The Pentagon may even be moving a carrier strike group into position, a floating fortress that projects American power wherever it goes. The presence of that kind of firepower with dozens of fighter jets would completely change the dynamic. It gives the U.S. overwhelming air superiority and the ability to strike targets with incredible speed and precision. Now, this deployment serves two purposes. First, it provides the tools to enforce this new doctrine of destruction. The destroyers and air power can create a near impenetrable net of surveillance and firepower. Second, it sends an unmistakable political message. You don't deploy a naval armada for a few speedboats. You do it to send a clear message to the narco state run by the Maduro regime. His naval armada is being coordinated under a new structure. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced the formation of a new counter narcotics task force led by the U.S. Marine Corps, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force. This move decisively puts warfighters in charge, replacing the law enforcement bureaucracy that failed for decades with the results oriented military command. And this is getting into what you're talking about, that possible strike in the next 72 hours. So the tactics represent a complete necessary militarization of the effort. The old way involved the Coast Guard making legal arrests. The new way involves the Navy and Marine Corps using their warfighting capabilities to achieve military objectives. The deployment of warships has set the stage for a shooting war, and the next tactic shows this war is about to spill ashore. And there is now been the estimates are possible us attacking airfields and stuff that are known military and narco terror traffic type of uh airfields, and also warehouses that are known drug warehouses or cocaine processing warehouses and manufacturing stuff. That's where I think the suspected attack in the next 72 hours is coming from.
Yeah,
If
I
there
mean,
is.
I think also, like they said, the psychological impact of doing a buildup and then not taking action right away is going to prevent the Venezuelans from, they're not going to respond to a buildup again in the future. But I personally think that's the point, is that if they have made the decision to strike at a certain point, then imagine you're a Venezuelan conscript in charge of like you're a radar technician. Those guys already ran ragged. They don't have enough food to feed their people. For a country that has as large oil reserves as they do, I can tell you right now that even the government facilities go half the day without power. So, maybe they don't attack in the next 72 hours, but if a week, 2 weeks goes by, like the longer that this goes on, the better position, like militarily. I'm not talking from a legal standpoint, but I think everyone kind of arguing that the president doesn't have the power to do this. It's funny they're making this criticism now, because for the last 30, 40 years, there's been very little objection to these kinds of actions from either side, depending on who the president was. So,
Well, yeah, because every president since the Vietnam War and the Korean conflict, which is almost every action that we've taken, whether you look at the Korean conflict, whether you look at the Gulf, they call it the Gulf War, but it was really the Gulf conflict. The war lasted for like a day before then it became a police action again. And then we were still over in the Middle East during all that time. Then you have the multiple different levels of the Iraqi and Afghanistan wars for the last 20 years. And only for the first like year and a half, 2 years where we actually declared in an actual war. After that, it wasn't a war, which kind of screws over our soldiers and our airmen and all that too, with the way they get paid and all that stuff. But the rest of the time, it becomes a policing action because the president of the United States does not need Congress's authority to launch preemptive defensive actions or preemptive policing actions to protect the United States or its assets or its allies. They only need permission to declare war, which they are not declaring war. They are declaring on a policing action on an enemy. Now, the funny thing is also if Congress wants to shut it down, they can cut the funding. I mean, simple as that. As long as the funding's left open for him to have the money to do it, then he can keep doing it even without declaring war. Congress has the ability to shut down the funding, but like you said, in the last 30 to 40 years, they have never shut down that funding. But for anybody we have watching, please, if y'all have enjoyed the content so far tonight, please hit that like or subscribe button, the follow or subscribe button. Also hit that like and share. And please send the comments, questions, anything like that. As we're going through it, usually we do a little more of the in-depth and a legal analysis side, but this one was kind of more of a little mixture of both. But I mean, this is really getting into like we've been talking about for a little bit now and this is why I kind of said that one is tactic 4 is the land is next, targeting infrastructure in Venezuela. I mean, that's really what it looks like it's going to be. And President Trump was even quoted saying the land is going to be next. I mean, those were the words of President Donald Trump himself on October 23rd, confirming what many analysts saw as the logical and necessary end to this campaign. After weeks of destroying boats at sea, the administration has signaled its intent to move the fight ashore, specifically targeting infrastructure inside Venezuela. I mean, another thing is you're talking about Venezuela used to be one of the most prosperous nations in the world. They used to be one of the most beautiful nations in the world, and now they're one of the most poorest and socialist-run communist regimes. And not only are they beneficial with oil and stuff like that, but there's other minerals in this strategic location of where Venezuela sits in the continent. I mean, you don't want China in there. You want to have an American foothold in there, not a Chinese foothold in it.
Yeah, I think that's good analysis because I think that is the bigger issue at play here, right? Is the United States made it very clear that even if we can't maintain a hegemony globally, at least this is our hemisphere, and
Yeah, because I've already seen it. When I went on my cruise, a lot of the Caribbean islands that we had pulled out of, started messing with, and also Britain had pulled out of, they were developing them, but everything was in Chinese. And that's the last thing we need is our biggest enemy having a foothold and possibly even a military foothold or even business footholds. I mean, we already let them get such a large foothold in Africa and control of rare earth minerals and stuff because we didn't think that it had a political or reason for us to go there when it did. And it's like, okay, do we want to be able to that's what a lot of people understand is a lot of this having a foothold or supporting certain our allies or having bases there has nothing to do, like, this is way off topic, but Greenland, everybody gets mad because he's joking about making Greenland the 51st state. Do they not understand the military strategicness of having a sub base in northern Greenland, which is literally the blind spot to not allow Russia to get anything past to us? I mean, strategically, we need a base up there in Greenland, that far north, to make sure we catch anything coming out of Russia, whether that's nukes being launched or submarines or whatever. It's a military strategic target on top of the amount of rare earth minerals it has. Now, obviously, President Trump would love it to make the 51st state, but more it was the fact of we need to be able to have a partnership with them or kind of like we have and actually have a base there and have a foothold in Greenland so the Chinese aren't.
Well, my thoughts on that might differ a little bit. I just any level of imperialism, I definitely don't want Greenland being the 51st state. Because it's kind of the what was it the Missouri Compromise, right, with the slave states, where the reason our system works so well is because it's balanced. And one of the downsides to having such a large sprawling empire is that you start bringing in populations that aren't necessarily educated or in line with our values. And I think that has
Well,
been a thorn in our side. And it's kind of like that's the cost. It's kind of the karmic effect of engaging in imperialism and globalism, really.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's why you could not make it a 51st state. You could make it kind of like Puerto Rico, or like we had with what you would call in the Pacific, where it's not where they don't have an actual voting. They don't have representatives in Congress and stuff, but they're financially kind of
Tied
attached
to
to
it.
us as a territory.
Yeah. As a territory, U.S. territory. Yeah,
And I think
that's what
that's more.
Nazis.
I think that was more of his joke about the 51st state was more of a territory than a physical state, because the I've even because we haven't been added a new state in so long. You don't even really study the legalities of statehood anymore. I mean, in all the
No,
constitutional studies I've done, it's never gotten to the point where we really studied to any depth on how you can legally add another state to the United States, to the Constitution. I mean, so
yeah,
I don't even know if it would be that easy to technically add a 51st state. I think it would be easier to do to just add it as a territory.
yeah. And then you have they admitted Alaska and Hawaii, but they didn't admit Puerto Rico. So in our history of adding different states, it's been considered. Usually there's compromises made. One state that before Republicans and Democrats, they had the Whigs, and they would have compromises. Um,
I mean,
so
your Whigs broke it. Your Whigs were your more Democrats. They were your Federalists. Then you had your Anti-Federalists, which became your more your Republicans, because Federalists were your it was is Jefferson, yeah, Jefferson, and I think Adams. A more they wanted the Constitution to be more to the point of like what they have in Europe and England, and not necessarily uh, a monarchical type thing, or necessarily your birth or station deciding whether you become president or not. But as far as the way the control of the Constitution had on everything was more that way, where the Anti-Federalists were against creating the Constitution. They were happy with the Articles of Confederation plus a couple minor amendments to the Articles of Confederation, which is literally originally what the Constitutional Convention was supposed to be, which is supposed to be amendments made to the Articles of Confederation. Then they decided just to totally do away with it. I mean, luckily it came out great. It's worked out. It worked really great for about 100 years. And then since coming out of the Great Depression, we have slowly gone to big government instead of responsible government. And it's funny how a lot of these Democrats and everybody complain about President Trump. Oh, he's doing this, this executive power, that's executive power. He's using all these executive orders. Well, thank your Democratic Congress members from the 30s and 40s for giving the president that authority. Because technically, executive orders are not constitutionally are not in the they're not in the Constitution. They're not constitutionally allowed. It was Congress who advocated their responsibilities and their constitutional prerogatives, because they can't get anything done, or they don't want to negotiate or pass the stuff or have their name attached to it, because it's too politically it's too much of a political hot potato per se. It's rotten eggs, and they want to get reelected. They care more about power and staying in office than they do what's best for the American people. And so they give it to the president, where they can, and or the executive the administrative state, executive branch, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to say, to where it can be unelected officials who are doing it, which is where we had the whole administrative state and executive, and where legislation became less full out public policy and more just a direction for the individual agencies then to craft the policy from the directions. And so if anybody wants to blame anybody for what's going on as far as the government goes, is that was because the Democrats controlled almost 70 years. They controlled the Congress, both houses in the Congress, House and Senate, and the presidency. And even if they didn't control the presidency, they still controlled Congress and the House and the Senate from like the 1900s to the 1950s or 60s. So all of this power that's been given to the president, and President Trump is now using to strip away, to give power back to states in certain areas, and then in other areas to strengthen the executive branch's power. It's the Democratic Party that did it. That's their fault, because they're the ones that started it back after the Great Depression, when they started the New Deal and all that.
Yeah, and that's true of the. I think there's some parts of the system of checks and balances that are functioning, but I think you're right. I think that a lot of our issues trace back to the early 20th century, and even to the Civil War, where that was Republican Lincoln. They took supreme action, executive action, in ways that hadn't been done before. But that's not to say it's good or bad, but you've definitely seen a shift of foreign diplomacy going to the president, and then many of the kind of social issues that should be handled by the legislature have gone to the courts. So really, it's what you're saying, is that you've got a class of politician at like the career politician level. Your legislators that are really the ones who have sold the democracy, sold out the republic, for personal gain. It's sad to say.
Like this is off the subject we're talking about, but I saw a post on X earlier today, and this person goes, "Oh, Rand Paul's wants you to not get your retirement until you're 70 and blah, or this and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, that's about right. I'm like, because do y'all not understand 2034 is not that far down the road? We're in 2025, almost 2026. In less than 10 years, Social Security and Medicaid, as they currently sit, will be insolvent. And when they go insolvent under current legislation, the Social Security, the first year, Social Security representatives will see a 25% cut in their pay. So if not being able to get your Social Security until you're 70 instead of 65 allows the program to not go insolvent until 2044, 2050, to give a little more time to figure out, or he said increase the amount of money that you're paying into your Social Security through your paychecks, which, because the problem is people forget, is when a lot of those social programs are created, you had like 5.5 or 7.5 people working for every 1.5 people that were actually getting the thing. And now it's like a 3-to-1 ratio. We're paying out more than we have coming in. And that's, and another thing with we get into social services, another problem is, and this goes kind of to my subject that I'm in on this week, is responsible government versus big government. Is, yes, it's responsible to help the needy and to help have social services to help the needy and all the stuff like that. But it's not responsible to create a generation of dependency and entitlement, thinking that the government can take care of me. Money's printed on, grows on trees, and I shouldn't have to work. I should just get $2,000 a month in SNAP benefits, and then I should get another $1,000 a month that covers my, or $1,300 a month that covers my electric and my rent, and I shouldn't have to do anything I don't want to do. No, you should only get that stuff if you're not able-bodied and you cannot work. If you are down on your luck and need help, then you should be able to get that assistance for a certain amount of time, allotted time, where during that time you take classes on financial literacy, or you get job training, or you go back to school or something, and elevate your station in life. And then you no longer get those that program. But just because it's funny, like, I know we've talked about this before, but look at the amount of people, and I've talked about this on a live the other week, was look at the amount of, they say, oh, white privilege and all this, but look at the amount of African born African Americans, the bachelor's graduation rate, even master graduation rate, plus the average household income versus the American born African Americans. It's astonishing, because the African born African Americans, they have a higher graduation rate, a higher success rate, a higher small business ownership rate, because of the fact that they don't have that victim mentality drilled into their head. They don't have that I'm entitled mentality drilled into their head.
Yeah. It's definitely a problem. I don't know how we fix it. Because you trace all that back. There's many underlying causes, and I think one is obviously slavery. I think the other one is the history of drug use in those communities. So
Well, that
it's
can
difficult.
also, that goes back into a lot of the people saying why, a lot of the arguments of why we never truly fought the drug war, because where did the drugs go and affect? Poor communities, obviously not just blacks. Obviously, if you look at your per capita ratio, it affected blacks more than whites. Obviously, it still affects more whites than blacks, but it affects maybe more per capita blacks than whites. And so you have that problem. That goes back to that there of, they use it to keep them down, to keep them. It's a form of racism and a form. So honestly, minorities should be ecstatic with what President Trump is doing in the drug war, because those drugs are the ones that have been killing their communities, have been driving their communities down, creating addiction and dependency, and the crime rates and the recidivism, and then going back to social services and welfare and SNAP and all that. And so they got to make a choice. It's like, do you want to keep getting all this free stuff, or do you want to be able to make it somewhere in life? Obviously, it's not, there's no easy way to do it. It's going to be hard at first. There's going to be some people that don't do it, but I'm sorry, if you are given a chance to go get a technical training degree, job training or something, to get a better job and get money, and you won't take that, and you think you just deserve free money, then sorry, you can live on the streets. You don't need a dime, because that's not the way it works. You don't just give free money out to people because they think they deserve free money. So I think it needs to we got to get hard with this stuff. And it's funny, they, like, when we just put a little work requirement, a minor work requirement of like 8 hours a week or something, they start flipping out. It's ridiculous.
I think a lot of these problems will be solved with AI. Not to get esoteric on you, but I just don't see how they won't be.
Well, the AI, honestly, the AI could make it worse, because
Yeah,
then
I guess
people,
two-tier society developing. Yeah. Let's hope not. I'm an eternal optimist.
Well, I mean, the thing is technically, okay, if everything's going to AI, then you definitely better get an education, because the only way you're going to make good money is if you can program. Because pretty much all your jobs are going to be programming robots and working on AI robots.
I think
hopefully they don't get to a point for a long time to where they're running on quantum computing. They can actually reprogram themselves. But
so, I've had this thought a few times when it comes to, like, just the economic system as a whole in the future. And you see it in movies, in sci-fi movies, where they all have digital money and they're scanning everything, right? So I think that is what they want to move towards. But when you think about money, like the value of money is derived from the fact that other people find it valuable, right? And
Well, yeah, I mean, that's anything with economics. I mean, you go back to uh, you can go back into the BCs or BC times, and in Africa they traded beads as money. I mean,
yeah, so with cryptocurrency, it's no different. It's the belief that this is valuable.
well, the
Gets
argument
people.
with cryptocurrency is that you actually have to create, you actually have to work for it. There's an actual physical, the mining process of it, the calculation power, the mining process of it to create the money that makes it, that gives it the value. It
Right.
would be the argument from a economic standpoint,
and
economist standpoint.
and once you convince people of that and they accept that, that's when it has value. Once they accept that argument. So we saw it kind of like, as far as like modernization goes, Hollywood is kind of where this first happened, where you know they commodified people's attention spans, and it's made billions of dollars. Obviously, we know Hollywood's a huge industry, but now it's being kind of diversified and democratized, because I mean, I don't know. I know you're on TikTok, so you know the number of people on there that are making kind of lowbrow. It's whatever gets people's attention. So I kind of see a future where people work jobs that everything's going to be content creation. It's going to be about what you say, how you can intellectually add to the conversation. People who are funny, people who can grab your attention. Essentially, that's going to be how our society stratifies who's valuable and who's not. And
I mean,
so
I won't disagree to a point that that's going to be a large part of the society, but you're still going to need doctors, nurses, scientists, engineers, all that stuff. You're, I do think that you're the people that were maybe in like the entertainment or the like waiting tables and or doing the more stuff that will be taken over by robots and automation and stuff like that. Yes, they will have to look to a more content creation uh type income and stuff like that, whether it's making funny videos, dancing videos, whether it's doing content creation like this, whether it's doing podcasts, whether it's doing political commentary, whether whatever it is. I think obviously that's going to be, because I mean we see it only getting larger and larger and larger. I mean, all the time you see more and more apps coming out. You see more and more companies creating apps that are monetizing. The competition becomes harder and stuff. But the thing is they'll have to make it. uh, The problem with it is it's still, they'll have to make a more way to make monetizing, because I mean it's hard to, if I had to survive on content creation I would be in trouble, because I mean I'll go weeks where I've got I'm getting hundreds of thousands of views in a week, and then the next week I'm only getting 20, 30,000 views. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I also don't have full time to concentrate to it. I'm a part time person posting full time videos, but I don't have the time to put all the extra production into it and research and constantly doing lives and all that stuff. I mean, some of these people I've known, they're content creators. I mean, they're on lives 8, 9 hours a day. I couldn't do that.
yeah, neither can I. Neither would I want to. Yeah, I think that. I think it's telling that you're doing this podcast though, because this kind of the future in a way is that you're. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I've seen doctors on TikTok. I've seen um, policy experts on there.
Oh
And
yeah, of course.
I don't know. I just hope that uh, in the future, if you're not good looking and if you're not intelligent, one of the two. I think this is obviously true throughout history, but it's definitely going to be a challenging world to figure out who deserves to eat or who deserves to, you know, kind of live a life of luxury versus those who don't. Like, what are we going to value? What are we
Yeah,
going to celebrate?
and that's the problem, is that everybody wants to see this perfect little world where everybody's equal, and that's not going to happen. Honestly, if I was talking about this last night, if we want to have a more equal society, that's not socialism. Let's get a flat tax. Let's get rid of these progressive tax systems, because every time that these tax policies are set up, they say a lot of the arguments are they always help the super rich. Sometimes they do, other times they can help the lower class too. But they try to claim every time tax cuts happen, it only helps the super rich. But that's total opposite, because it doesn't matter whether they charge businesses 39% taxes or 15% taxes. They're with all the deductions, especially the bigger major corporations, all the deductions that they've carved out through lobbying, they're not paying 15 or 39% anyways. They're paying zero. I mean, as simple as that. If we do a 10% flat tax, then everybody's paying a 10% flat of their income with no deductions. You have a simpler system, and you have it. You'll have a more even system, and also get rid of the estate tax or the death tax, because that has been the largest money grabber of all. Because you have a small owned family business that's been in the family for a couple generations, and during one generation they grew some, but not massively enough. And then when those parents pass away, if they didn't have that money put correctly into a trust and protect in a tax haven and protected, then those kids, they got a company that's worth $40 million, but let's say the cash liquidity is only less than $1 million, but they got to pay 30% death tax on it or estate tax on it. They can't come up with that because it's all tied up in assets and everything. And then no bank's going to approve them for a loan for that much when they still need operating loans and payroll and all that. So they have no choice but to sell the business out. And then they have to sell it for pennies on the dollar, don't get anything that it's worth. And then less than a generation, they're broke. I mean, people don't understand the amount of time that it takes majority of people to build a successful business. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over generations. And that's why we've seen our money. That's why we've seen our middle class disappear and become just a couple families that are super rich. It has nothing to do with the fact that we need socialism. We need to get rid of the progressive tax system, get a flat tax, and get rid of the estate tax. I mean, President Trump did a good move on this time. I think in the one big beautiful bill, he increased it to where now you don't the estate tax doesn't affect you until you have you're at least 50 million in assets or something like that. He did get it substantially up there. Honestly, you shouldn't be charged the estate tax till you have in the billions of assets. Because again, especially like trucking companies, you could have a trucking company that's got 90 million in assets and still only clear 5-10 million a year, if that, because it's all in trailers, trucks, truck yards, parking areas. It's all in that stuff. Once again, it's all tied up there.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. I've always been a proponent of the flat tax. And I think that it's funny that people don't realize this what's happening, but those tax laws are written and designed obviously by politicians who are beholden to lobbyists, and those lobbyists are beholden to the people with the most money. And it's kind of like when you create those laws where this generational wealth resets each and every time, the natural effect is going to be it's no different than gravity, right? The big get bigger. So you hear these rallying calls, tax the rich, but what they don't realize they're doing is they're insulating the rich, and they're creating bimodal system of distribution where if you're below XYZ in terms of your overall net worth, then you're never going to get bigger than that, because you're going to always be in that pocket of taxes where you'll never get bigger than someone who's not subject to those taxes, or to those that don't have to pay it, because they do have those complex legal protections, because they have access to the best legal services.
Yep. No, and I agree. And that's what people don't understand, is they always want to try to they don't understand half the stuff that's even going on. They just believe everything that they're told. And what they don't understand is politicians are literally playing a psychological game for power in elections. They're not they may initially, when they start out, do it because they want to help. But once they get that taste of power and they're like, okay, if I can just maintain power, I can change a little bit at a time. I can change a little bit at a time. But the longer they're in there, the further they get away from that. The further they get pulled towards the other side. Yeah, so hopefully we'll see what's going on here in Venezuela. I'm glad that we're finally taking the fight to these drug cartels and finally ending it versus just sitting there and doing nothing and allowing it to destroy our inner cities, allowing it to destroy our population, allowing it to destroy our all that. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I've just, on one hand, I think that any amount of bloodshed, I don't want that to happen for anybody. But I also know that there's a huge number of people who are suffering in Venezuela and they're treated no better than slaves. And
I mean,
unless
for
you're,
every cartel member you take, for every cartel member we take out, you're probably saving about 1,000 lives, not just from the drugs, but from the people that they're going to take, the lives they'll take.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to live in that society. And it's like, what's the greater act of evil? Is not intervening and letting it persist, or intervening? And, obviously that's not ideal, but, this could be done correctly. This could be done incorrectly. We'll see how it plays out. I think there'll be more to talk about in the
Obviously, yeah,
coming
obviously the
weeks.
last 40 years it hasn't worked. So,
Yeah, right on, right on.
I mean, what's the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over again and claim that it's working?
That's what they say. Yeah, that's the definition of madness. So,
That's been the war on drugs for the last 40 years.
yeah, and
Ever since.
I think they were never trying to end it. We know that. There's too much money, and
Yeah.
everything's a money machine. You have to hire people to do investigations, searches, and I know from my experience in the military and intelligence, and I also know from watching events like January 6th, they have the capability to track almost anybody. They can do it if they want to do it. It's just a matter of whether or not they actually want to do it. So,
Okay, really, before we end, just to get right back on topic, what we were talking about earlier is okay. So around October 1st, the administration reportedly notified Congress that the United States was now in a non-international armed conflict, or NIAC, with drug cartels, which is what allowed them to do it without needing Congress's approval. That was the legal loophole or legal declaration or linchpin that they used for everything. It was a deliberate move to shift the entire paradigm from law enforcement to armed conflict. In simple terms, the old law enforcement model says you can only use lethal force to stop an imminent threat. The law of armed conflict, however, is completely different. During a war, you are largely permitted to target and kill enemy combatants, which is why they took it from a whatever armed conflict from the police in action to that. Plus, the administration is asserting that cartels are no longer criminals. They are an enemy military force like Al Qaeda or ISIS, which they've proven that they are. I mean, they've proven that they're up to that.
I certainly think that's true. I won't. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Again,
Yeah. Yeah, so it says, and the people on those boats are not suspects. They're unlawful combatants who can be lawfully killed. This is the exact same legal framework used after 9/11 to justify drone strikes against terrorist networks, which that's what I was saying is like we were talking about earlier is that it's not like he's the first president to use this action or do it.
no,
Oh,
like you said, every president's done it.
all right. Well, Alabama John, I don't know. I'm not streaming directly from Rumble. We're on uh we're I'm streaming through Restream, so I don't even know how to actually pull anybody up here right now or to bring any guest up without having a way to get you a link. Plus, we're about to end the show anyways. We're been a full hour now, and I didn't get dinner before the show, so I'm about ready to go grab dinner. Had the kids out for trick or treating last night. So
Yeah, this I'll try to get my camera, and I don't know what's going on my computer, but on the phone's not ideal. I've got to tap this every. If my screen goes black, it starts kicking me out again. So uh, hopefully I'll have that fixed. It was
All
working
right.
earlier.
Well, anybody that's on here now, please make sure to if you've enjoyed our content, please make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button, and also hit the like and share. We will be on this back here again this coming Wednesday or Friday at 7 p.m. I will, if you're following us on YouTube or my personal Facebook, then you will get a notification of the next time we go live, because I schedule it through Restream once we got it picked out. But we would like to thank y'all for joining in and for the show, and hope you enjoyed it. Also, you can check out our website you see scrolling across the bottom of the screen there, which can get you through to all of our previous content. And this was a little bit off of kind of what we usually do. We usually stick more to the legality and policies of it. We kind of got off of that on today a little bit. So thank you.